The wind screamed across the surface of Helios 7 like a living thing, carrying crystals of ice that could strip flesh from bone. Jackson Reed barely noticed anymore. 3 years alone on this frozen rock had made him numb to most things: the cold, the silence, the endless gray sky that never quite brightened into day. He adjusted his thermal suit and continued trudging toward the old mining station, toolkit bouncing against his hip with each step. The station was dead, like everything else on this moon. Corporate had abandoned it 5 years ago when the ore veins dried up, leaving behind rusted equipment and empty promises. Now Jackson was the only one who bothered maintaining the automated weather stations scattered across the ice fields. It wasn't glamorous work, but it kept him fed and far from the complications of human civilization. He was halfway through replacing a burnt-out sensor array when he heard it, a sound so out of place that he froze with his wrench still in hand. It was soft, almost swallowed by the wind, but unmistakably organic. A whimper. Someone was crying. Jackson's first instinct was to dismiss it as ice shifting or equipment failure. But the sound came again, and this time he heard the raggedness of breath behind it. Someone was hurt. Or worse, Doc. He followed the sound around the station's perimeter, past collapsed solar panels and snow-buried machinery. The crying led him to a small gap between 2 storage containers that had toppled years ago, creating a crude shelter from the wind. And there, pressed into the smallest possible space, was a girl. She wasn't human, Dot. Her skin was the color of deep twilight, a rich purple blue that seemed to hold its own luminescence even in the dim light. Delicate silver markings traced patterns across her exposed arms and face, swirling like liquid metal just beneath the surface. She couldn't have been more than 17 or 18 in human years, though Jackson had no idea how her species aged. Her clothes were torn and inadequate for the cold, and she was shaking so violently that he could hear her teeth chattering. But what struck him most were her eyes. They were large and amber-colored, filled with a terror so profound that it made his chest tighten. When she saw him, she didn't scream. She just curled tighter into herself, as if trying to disappear. "Hey," Jackson said softly, raising his empty hands. "I'm not going to hurt you." The girl's eyes darted to his face, then away, then back again. She was clearly weighing whether to run or fight, but she looked too weak to do either. Her lips were tinged blue, or whatever color hypothermia would be on her species, and frost had formed on her eyelashes. "You're freezing," Jackson said, slowly lowering himself to a crouch. He kept his movements deliberate and unthreatening. "When's the last time you ate?" The girl's jaw trembled. For a moment, she seemed unable to speak. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, 3 days. Maybe 4. Her accent was strange, with musical undertones that no human throat could produce, but her standard was clear enough. Jackson felt anger flash through him, not at her, but at whatever circumstances had left a kid starving and freezing in the middle of nowhere. He shrugged off his pack and rummaged inside until he found one of his emergency ration packs. They were designed to be eaten cold, but he activated the heating element anyway, watching his steam began to rise from the pouch. The smell of reconstituted stew filled the air. The girl's nostrils flared. Her eyes locked onto the food with desperate hunger, but she didn't reach for it. Instead, she pressed herself harder against the metal wall. "Please," she whispered. "Please don't." "Don't what?" Jackson asked gently. "Don't feed you? Don't be kind to me." Her voice cracked. "It will only make it worse when you realize what I am." Jackson studied her face, seeing layers of hurt and expectation there. Someone had taught this girl that she didn't deserve kindness. Someone had taught her to expect cruelty. "Listen," he said, holding out the warm food. "I don't know what you are or what you think you are. Right now, I just see someone who needs help. So please take this." The girl stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for deception. Whatever she saw there must have surprised her, because slowly, so slowly, she reached out. Her hand was trembling as she took the pouch from him. She held it like it might vanish, like someone might snatch it away. When she finally brought it to her lips and tasted the first spoonful, something in her broke. She began to eat with desperate, gulping motions, trying to slow herself, but unable to fight the overwhelming hunger. Jackson turned away, giving her what privacy he could while she ate. "My name's Jackson," he said, looking out at the ice fields. "What's yours?" There was a pause. Then, "Nira. Nice to meet you, Nira." He glanced back at her. "Mind if I ask what you're doing out here?" Nira lowered the half-empty pouch, her amber eyes suddenly alert and afraid. "Running. From what?" "From them." She pointed up at the sky with a shaking hand. Jackson looked up and felt his blood go cold. High above, barely visible against the gray clouds, red lights were moving in a search pattern. They swept across the ice in methodical grids, hunting for something. Hunting for someone. "They found me," Nira breathed, and the silver markings on her skin suddenly flared bright, pulsing with an inner light. "They always find me." Jackson watched as the lights moved closer, and he understood with sudden clarity that this girl wasn't just running from trouble. She was the center of something far bigger than a simple chase. The way her markings glowed, the way the very air seemed to shimmer around her, there was power here. Power and danger. He should walk away. Any sensible person would. This wasn't his problem, wasn't his fight. But when he looked at Nira, at this terrified girl who expected nothing but cruelty from the universe, he found he couldn't do it. "Come on," he said, standing and offering his hand. "My workshop isn't far. It's shielded from most scans." Nira stared at his outstretched hand like she'd never seen one before. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." "Maybe that's exactly why," Jackson said. "Because I don't know all the reasons I'm supposed to hate you yet." Something flickered in her eyes, hope, maybe, or the ghost of it. She took his hand, and Jackson pulled her to her feet. Her skin was ice cold against his, but where their hands touched, her markings glowed warmer dot above them. The red lights swept closer, and Jackson Reed, who had spent 3 years avoiding human contact and responsibility, found himself running through the frozen wastes with an alien girl's hand in his. Heading straight into trouble he couldn't begin to understand. The workshop was only half a kilometer away, but every step felt like a mile. Nira stumbled frequently, weak from hunger and cold, and each time Jackson had to slow down and help her up. Behind them, the red lights intensified, and he could hear something now. A low thrumming sound that made his bones vibrate. "They're using resonance scanners," Nira gasped as they ran. "They can track the frequency of my markings. Can you hide it?" Jackson asked. "Turn it off or something?" "I've tried." Her voice was bitter. "It only gets brighter when I try to suppress it." They reached the workshop just as the thrumming grew loud enough to hurt. Jackson slammed his palm against the entry panel and the reinforced door slid open. He practically shoved Nira inside, then followed and hit the lockdown sequence. Metal shutters descended over the windows, and the interior lights dimmed to emergency blue. Nira collapsed against a workbench, breathing hard. In the dim light, her markings cast dancing shadows on the walls, making the small space feel alive with movement. "How long until they find us?" Jackson asked, already moving to his equipment locker. "Minutes. Maybe less." Nira looked around the workshop, taking in the tools, the half-assembled machines, the evidence of a solitary life. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have let you help me. Now they'll come for you too." "Who are they exactly?" Nira's face twisted with old pain. "My own people. The Solvari." She touched the markings on her arm. "These marks. Where I come from, They're called the curse of the condemned. Children born with them are considered abominations. Bad luck. Harbingers of disaster. That's insane, is it? Nira's laugh was hollow. When I was 8, my emotions caused an energy surge that destroyed half my family's dwelling. When I was 12, my fear during an attack triggered a wave that killed 3 people. The marks don't just glow, Jackson. They do things. Dangerous things. Jackson stopped digging through his locker and turned to face her fully. So they decided to hunt you down? Execute a kid for something she can't control? They call it cleansing. Nira's voice was flat. It's supposed to be merciful. Quick, but I ran. She looked at him with those haunted amber eyes. I've been running for 6 months. And now I've run out of places to hide. The thrumming outside grew louder. Something landed on the roof with a heavy thud, making dust rain from the ceiling. Then another thud. And another. Nira's markings flared brilliant white. They're here, she whispered. The pounding on the workshop roof grew rhythmic, methodical. They weren't trying to break in yet, just letting Nira know they'd found her. Jackson could hear voices now, speaking in a language that sounded like wind chimes and thunder mixed together. Nira had gone completely still, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. The silver markings across her skin pulsed in time with her racing heartbeat, casting the workshop in alternating waves of light and shadow. She looked like she'd stopped breathing. Nira, Jackson said quietly. Stay with me. She didn't respond. Her pupils had dilated until her eyes were almost entirely black, and the temperature in the room was dropping rapidly. Frost began forming on the metal surfaces near her. Nira! Jackson grabbed her shoulders, and the contact seemed to jolt her back to awareness. Her eyes focused on his face. I'm sorry, she whispered. When I panic, I can't control it. The marks, they respond to fear. And when they activate, she broke off as something heavy slammed against the workshop door. The reinforced metal buckled slightly inward. Jackson's mind raced. The workshop was designed to withstand ice storms and equipment malfunctions, not a determined assault. They had maybe 2 minutes before the door gave way. Is there another way out? Nira asked desperately. Jackson hesitated, then nodded. The maintenance tunnels. They run underneath the whole outpost. But what? They're not safe. Parts of them are flooded with coolant. Others have collapsed. I've never mapped them fully because I've never needed to. Another impact against the door. This time, the metal groaned and a crack appeared along the seal. Safer than staying here, Nira said. Jackson couldn't argue with that logic. He rushed to the far corner of the workshop and pulled aside a heavy storage container, revealing a circular hatch in the floor. The wheel lock was rusted from disuse, but after some effort, it began to turn. The hatch opened with a hiss of stale air. Below was darkness and the sound of dripping water. Ladies first, Jackson said. Grabbing an emergency light pack from his locker, Nira lowered herself through the hatch without hesitation, her markings providing enough light to see the ladder rungs. Jackson followed, pulling the hatch closed behind them just as the workshop door finally gave way. He could hear boots or whatever the Solvari wore thundering into the space above. They descended in silence, the only sounds their breathing and the distant drip of water. The ladder led down at least 20 meters before depositing them in a narrow tunnel that stretched in both directions. The walls were covered in ice and old piping, and the air smelled of rust and ozone. This way, Jackson said, choosing the left passage at random. Stay close. They moved through the tunnel system for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. Nira's markings provided their primary light source, and Jackson couldn't help noticing how they seemed to pulse with her emotional state. When they heard sounds behind them, the clang of the hatch opening, voices echoing through the tunnels, The markings flared bright enough to hurt his eyes. "They're tracking us," Nira said, her voice tight with controlled panic. "I told you, the resonance scanners can follow my frequency. Then we need to put distance between us and them." Jackson quickened his pace, but Nira grabbed his arm. "Wait, listen." He stopped, straining his ears. Ahead of them, the sound of rushing water grew louder. They rounded a corner and found their path blocked by a partially collapsed section of tunnel. Water poured through cracks in the ceiling, creating a freezing waterfall that had already flooded the passage knee-deep. "We'll have to wade through," Jackson said. "I can't swim," Nira admitted. "My people were from a desert world. Water is sacred, rare. You don't need to swim. Just hold on to me." Jackson offered his hand again, and after a moment's hesitation, Nira took it. The water was shockingly cold, even through their thermal gear. Nira gasped as they waded in, her fingers tightening around Jackson's. Her markings dimmed in the water, as if the liquid dampened their glow. They moved carefully, testing each step. The current was stronger than it looked, pulling at their legs. Halfway across, Nira's foot slipped on something slick. She went down hard, her hand ripping from Jackson's grasp. The water closed over her head. Jackson lunged after her, his hands finding her arm in the murky darkness. He hauled her up, and she emerged sputtering and terrified. Her markings blazed back to life, and for a second, the water around them began to steam. Energy crackled across the surface like miniature lightning. "Easy," Jackson said, pulling her close. "I've got you. You're okay." Nira clung to him, her whole body trembling. "I hate this. I hate being weak. I hate being afraid all the time." "Being afraid doesn't make you weak," Jackson said. "Running for 6 months. That takes strength most people don't have." They made it to the other side and continued deeper into the tunnel system. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit had grown quieter, but Jackson knew it was only temporary. Eventually, the Solvari would find a way through or around the flooded section. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber, an old storage depot by the look of it. Ancient crates were stacked against the walls, most of them empty or containing useless parts. But more importantly, there were several exits leading in different directions. "We can rest here for a minute," Jackson said, checking each tunnel opening. "Catch our breath." Nira sank down against a crate, water still dripping from her clothes. Her markings had settled into a steady, softer glow. "You should leave me here," she said quietly. "They only want me. If you're not with me when they find us, they might let you go." "Not happening, Jackson." I said no. He sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "I'm not abandoning you to people who want to kill you for something you can't control. That's not who I am." Nira turned to look at him, really look at him, for the first time since they'd met. Her amber eyes searched his face. "Why? You've been alone out here for years. You could have just ignored me, called the authorities, done anything except put yourself in danger. Why help me?" Jackson was quiet for a moment, trying to find words for something he didn't fully understand himself. 3 years ago, I came out here to get away from people. I'd been hurt, betrayed by someone I trusted. I thought if I just isolated myself, I'd never have to deal with that pain again. He looked down at his hands. "But you know what I learned? Loneliness is its own kind of pain. Maybe worse because you choose it. And when I saw you today scared alone, expecting the worst from everyone, I saw myself. What I'd become? Someone who'd given up on people being decent." He met her eyes. "I didn't like it. So maybe I'm helping you as much for me as for you." Something shifted in Nira's expression. The permanent tension in her face softened slightly. "You're a strange human, Jackson Reed. I'll take that as a compliment." A small smile ghosted across her lips, the first he'd seen from her. It transformed her face, making her look younger, less haunted. But the moment was broken by a distant sound echoing through the tunnels. Voices getting closer. Nira's smile vanished. "We need to keep moving." They stood, and Jackson was about to choose one of the exit tunnels when Nira suddenly grabbed his wrist. Her touch was warm, almost hot, and her markings were pulsing rapidly. "What is it?" he asked. "That tunnel." She pointed to the rightmost opening. "Something about it feels ... different. Different how?" "I don't know. The markings, they're reacting to something down there. Like they recognize it." She looked uncertain. "I know that probably sounds insane." "Everything about today has been insane," Jackson said. "Might as well lean into it." They entered the tunnel Nira had indicated. It was narrower than the others, with walls that seemed older, made of a different material. The ice here was darker, almost black, and there were symbols carved into the stone beneath symbols that made Nira stop dead in her tracks. "This is ancient Solvari script," she breathed. "But this moon, my people have never been here. How is this possible?" Jackson ran his fingers over the carved symbols. They were worn smooth by time, but still visible. "What do they say?" Nira moved closer, her markings casting light on the writings. As she read, her expression shifted from confusion to shock to something that might have been fear or wonder. He couldn't tell which. "It's a warning," she said slowly. "It says, 'Here lies the first song. Let none wake it whose voice is not pure. The marked ones alone may enter, for they carry the key in their blood.'" "The marked ones," Jackson repeated. "That's you." Nira's hand went to her markings unconsciously. "This doesn't make sense. The marks are supposed to be a curse, a random mutation, not a key to something. Maybe your people got it wrong." "My people don't get things wrong. We're ancient, advanced. We've studied these marks for thousands of years. And in those thousands of years, did any of the marked ones survive long enough to find out what the marks really meant?" The question hung in the air between them. Nira's face went pale or paler than usual. "No," she whispered. "They're always cleansed young, before they can fully mature, before their powers can stabilize. The elders say it's mercy, but maybe it's something else," Jackson finished. "Maybe it's fear. Fear of what you could become." Before Nira could respond, the sound of pursuit grew suddenly louder. The Solvari had found their trail. "We need to decide," Jackson said urgently. "Do we keep running, or do we see where this tunnel leads?" Nira looked at the carved warnings, then back the way they'd come. Her markings pulsed faster, brighter. "I've spent my whole life running from what I am," she said quietly. "Maybe it's time I ran toward it instead. Then let's go." They plunged deeper into the ancient tunnel. The air grew warmer the further they went, and the darkness seemed to press in from all sides despite Nira's light. The tunnel began to slope downward, taking them deep beneath the moon's frozen surface. Behind them, the voices of the hunters echoed off the stone walls, shouting in that musical, terrible language. But ahead, something else was calling. Jackson couldn't hear it, but he could see Nira responding to it, her markings growing steadily brighter, her pace quickening as if drawn by invisible strings. The tunnel opened suddenly into a vast cavern, and what they saw there stopped them both in their tracks. In the center of the space, suspended in what looked like crystallized energy, was a structure. It wasn't Solvari in design. It was something older, stranger. Geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly, angles that seemed wrong, colors that had no name. And all across its surface, glowing with the same silver light as Nira's markings, were thousands upon thousands of symbols. "By the first mothers," Nira breathed. "It's beautiful." Jackson wasn't sure beautiful was the word he'd use. Terrifying, maybe. Awe-inspiring, certainly. The structure hummed with power, a sound he felt in his bones rather than heard with his ears. "What is it?" he asked. "I don't know, but it knows me." Nira took a step forward, then another. Her markings were blazing now, so bright that Jackson had to shield his eyes. "It's singing to me, Jackson. I can hear it in my head. It's been waiting. All this time, it's been waiting for someone like me." "Nira, wait!" But she was already moving forward, drawn like a moth to flame. As she approached the structure, the crystallized energy around it began to crack and fall away in shimmering pieces. The symbols on its surface lit up in sequence, and the humming grew to a crescendo that made the entire cavern shake. Then everything went silent. Nira stood before the structure, her hand raised, palm out. The markings on her skin had spread, flowing up her arms, across her shoulders, painting patterns across her face and neck. She looked like a living constellation. "Nira?" Jackson called softly. She turned to look at him, and her eyes were glowing the same silver as her marks. When she spoke, her voice had harmonics in it, layers of sound that no single throat should be able to produce. "They lied about everything," she said, and she sounded both heartbroken and furious. "The marks aren't a curse, Jackson. They're a gift. An inheritance. My people, they knew. The elders knew, and they've been eliminating marked children for generations to keep this secret buried." "What secret?" Before she could answer, voices erupted behind them. The Solvari hunters had arrived.